and welcome to Recruitment Bootcamp. This is Allison Abesaker again. You haven't heard my voice in a couple weeks. Mariah's going to make me the presenter right now, and then we'll get this show started. We're looking forward to, I can't believe it, week 7 of this presentation. I'm going to turn it over first to do some intro to a member of our team you haven't heard from at all yet, Suzanne Spear, who is going to talk you through the next steps.
Hi, and good afternoon. Again, welcome to week 7 of Recruitment Bootcamp. You have officially made it over the halfway mark. So everyone take a second, pat yourself on the back for not only being here today, but making it through halfway through this Recruitment Bootcamp process. Easy for me to say today. Today, we are going to be talking about advertising and social media. So it's something that, you know, everybody, there's sort of a lot of buzz about it, but it's really important part of the recruitment process. So we are excited to talk to you about that today. A little bit of housekeeping. So per usual, we are recording. So just keep that in mind. We want you to ask questions in the tab. The GoToWebinar tab, there is a question section. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have that come up during this webinar. And also have fun. This is definitely something that can be as fun as we make it. So we are really excited to have fun here. Today's presenter is Ann Hogan. Again, she was with us on our last webinar, so we are excited to have her expertise here today. And then the rest of the faculty that we have here at the STAR Center at ACU is Allison, who you just heard from, Mariah, and myself, in addition to Ann. And just to review our boot camp goals, we are here to build a recruitment strategy and the processes that are within that recruitment strategy. And in the process, we are also here to build relationships with each other, especially on the discussion board and through, and also relationships with the other folks that are on your team. So having said all that, I will turn it over to Ann.
Thank you, Suzanne. And this is Ann Hogan. I just want to quickly say thank you so much for being here today. This is awesome. We've got some really fun and exciting information to go through. And before we get started, real quickly on that build relationships, I really want to stress that. And when I think of relationships, if you've seen the show Friends, which I hope most of you probably have, right? They're the group that support each other. They love each other, they give feedback to each other, right? They're just friends. And when I think about the relationships that we want to build here, think about that TV show Friends. And of course, you'll have their song in your head all day, and you can thank me later for that. But, you know, I'll be here for you. And I'm not about to sing it for you, but I want you to think about that we here at the STAR Center are certainly here for you. So be sure to access the STAR Center. At the same time, build the relationships with the other cohorts in this group, because ultimately you can also rely on them. And so I really want to just make sure that you're introducing yourself on the discussion board, tag your health center, maybe put up your LinkedIn place we can go to find you on LinkedIn so we can all connect. So we're going to talk about social media and the importance of doing all those things. So today, truly build relationships. So you can thank me later for having that friend song in your head the rest of the day. I'll be there for you. But we are actually here for you. So as we get started, let's talk about this. And my mouse is not working, Allison. So if you could please advance, that would be great. Oh, I don't know who did that, but it changed, so that's good. All right, so last week's recap, our priorities and our budget, and we'll quickly run through this because we have a lot of information to go through. But remember, when you're recruiting, to identify who are your priorities. I know some of you may have anywhere from 3 openings to 30 openings or even more. So think about those priorities, and you could say they're all 30, but you're not going to be able to recruit for 30 people probably all at once effectively. Now you can put ads out for all 30, but you really have to determine where those priorities are to really be successful. So target, say, your top 3 priorities, whether you're family practice, your nurse practitioner, someone who's retiring, you need to replace them. Think about who that is and go after that 100%, right? Put your focus where your priority is and take them one at a time, kind of knock them off one at a time. Because if you do too many at once, you just won't be effective. So really think about your priorities and also the positions that are the priorities, right? You can't, if you hire all your medical assistants, that's great, but if you don't have a doc on staff, that doesn't do much good. So you want to coordinate your teams and recruit those teams, if that makes sense. So start there, and you can always watch last week's webinar. It's up on the discussion board, and it's just a link through YouTube. If you Google it in YouTube, you won't find it, but you have to use that secret link. Then we go to last week's recap on the recruitment budget. Let me see if my mouse works here. Oh, well, it worked. Something worked. There we go. So the recruitment budget, we just want to talk about, there's the staff costs. Of course, you want to be tracking your staff costs. There was some discussion of that on the discussion board about hourly costs and things like that. Now, don't get too much into the weeds of this. It's important to get your recruitment budget correct, but we're all HR or administrative type people here. So unless you're an accountant or a CPA, get it as close as you can. And yes, I would love it to be actually accurate, but be sure to maybe just talk with your CFO about what are the staff costs that they have in payroll. And maybe that's an easier way to get that information than just calculating everything hourly. And of course, hours vary for people. So you might like to just go to payroll or to the CFO and get some of those staff costs. They can help you with that. Outside recruiting expenses. As we all know, that's expensive. So you should be tracking that. Your interview expenses, it's something that we don't think about a lot, right? Because if your medical director is involved in the interview, they're not doing other functions or they're not seeing patients. So those are all expenses that should be accounted for. And then your hiring expenses. What does it actually cost to hire someone on and onboard them and train them? And that's how you get your total recruitment budget. And again, be sure to go back and watch last week's recap if you haven't done that. Next slide, please. Please. All right, the discussion board. I thank you so much because all of us here at the STAR Center have been just thrilled that you have been utilizing this discussion board. And so we've had a lot of comments on the boards this last couple of weeks. We had a lot of questions about HR metrics because that was one of the questions is, are you collecting those? And so later, either today or tomorrow, we'll get some information up on the discussion board as to what is an HR metric, how do you calculate it, and what should you possibly track over the next year. So we'll get that information up on the discussion board, but be sure you're using the discussion board to connect with each other. And if you haven't introduced yourself on the discussion board, be sure to do that. Now, before we start today, we are going to do a couple poll questions. And they are, that's the next slide, please. All right, tales from the discussion board. This is where we do our polling questions. So we actually have 2 today, and I am not able to see when they're launched possibly. So the first one is, what social media outlets do you currently use for advertising? Select one or any of them that apply to you. So Facebook, LinkedIn, we're going to talk about both of those a little bit today, a little bit about Twitter, or do you use all of them or something else? So please put in your answers right there, and I'll wait for the responses. Oh, wow. Okay, I got the poll in progress here. 63% use Facebook, 20% use LinkedIn, nobody's on Twitter, 20% use all, and 10% use other. So I'd like to know that other is on the discussion board. But it's interesting because we're going to talk a lot about LinkedIn and Facebook and the differences. Now, the second question is, have you included your current staff in your recruitment efforts? Yes or no? And we're going to talk about the importance of doing so. So let's see. Right now, we have 75% voted. So come on, the other 25%. Oh, we're almost there. 83% voted. Either way, even with the other 17% that didn't vote yet, we still have 90% that do. And so we'll talk about some of those ideas to make that even more beneficial to you. I'm glad you're using your current staff. So that's awesome. So now we go to the next slide, and we're just going to real quickly go through what we've actually done and how far we've gone in these 7 weeks, right? We've talked about community, team, priorities, your budget, your recruiting firms. Today, it's all advertising and social media and the importance of doing so. So why don't we go to the next slide here? Again, your ads, your Facebook, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, your Google+, maybe Pinterest, maybe Instagram, all those different things, right? That's what it's all about. It's getting your message out, not only as a health center, but also as a great place to work and what openings you have. So this is very, very important. And as much as people kind of want to poo-poo sometimes social media, we can't do that any longer. That's where it's actually at. So not very often you see billboards and things like that on the side of the road much anymore, right? There is no existence of newspapers to advertise in, basically. So you're online doing this. So that's what we're going to go through today. So next slide, please. And this is something to ponder here real quick, because this is an important statistic for you to think about. So active recruiting is when people are actually, I'm looking for a job, I'm trying to leave my current position, and I'm actively seeking out another position. That's only 25% of the workforce, a very small percentage. Most people are recruited through passive recruiting. And that is where, you're happy with your job, you love where you're working, right? But something comes across and it's a new opportunity. It's a promotion. It's the organization you always wanted to work for. And that is then how you get recruited away from the job you actually love, right? So that's a passive recruiting effort. And when you think about all the large recruitment firms, they're emailing your physicians right now, probably on average at least 5 to 7 different passive recruitment advertisements to them per week, talking about the great communities, a great opportunity that exists somewhere else. So that's how they actually recruit physicians. And so if you've got a recruitment firm working for you, believe me, that's exactly what they're doing to other physicians in other communities. They're trying to lure them away from there for you. And that's how they do it. And 75% of the workforce is actually passively recruited, and it's actually higher than that for physicians. So that's important to remember as you go through this, that the advertisements really do count. Next slide, please. So this is the definition of advertising, right? It's a call to action, right? It's an action of calling something to the attention of. When you think about, say, the Super Bowl ads, right? They call you to attention. When you think about Pepsi ads or Coke ads or any kind of Target ads, whatever they are, right? They call you to do something. They want something from you, and they're getting your attention, whether it be through good advertising or kind of risque advertising. They're getting your attention when you watch the ad, and you either like it or you don't, right? So, but you look at the magazines, they're full of advertising. You look at the advertisements for publications. The difference nowadays from this Merriam-Webster definition is that a lot of those print pieces don't exist any longer. So this is why we need to go into social media. Next slide, please. Now, when we talk about advertising, we're going to talk about 3 different areas that you need to work on. One is you need to plan your ad, right? Make it very deliberate and descriptive. So if you are, say, living in a quaint community in the Plains, you need to be descriptive and explain where you're at, right? It's not just, we have a family practice opening that's full-time in such and such a community in eastern Nebraska, right? You want to describe where it's actually at. Do you have wide open spaces? So you could be the cowboy or cowgirl that you dreamed of as a child. Do you have an urban setting where there's concerts, there's live music, there's shopping, there's arts, you can bike to work? Think about all the reasons you live in the community in which you do, and plan the ad that way. And if you want, put up the last ad that you just ran, and we can give feedback or suggestions of ideas of how to make it a little bit more attractive on the discussion board, and other people can also jump in. Or say, you know, yeah, I'd love, based on what you put here, I would love to work there. Or based on what you put there, I'm still wondering about where exactly this is. Or can you describe your health center a little bit more? So be sure to put it up on the discussion board, and we'll be glad to look at that and give you suggestions or tell you where we think it just absolutely rocks the boat, where it's just awesome. So, but planning your ad, I cannot tell you how important that is. It's not just 5 sentences that say you have an opening. You need to think about what it needs to tell someone who's looking at it. And read it from the sense of, would this ad attract me to actually apply? So is it descriptive enough? Does it tell me about your health center? Does it tell me the great things that you're doing at your health center? Does it tell me about the employee culture of the health center? Does it tell me about the community? How large is it? How are the schools? Maybe there are some special things about your community, whether it be geography, maybe it's culture, maybe it's that you have the most coffee shops in the United States that are on each corner. It doesn't matter. Just think about why it is that it's special to live where you're recruiting someone. And be very descriptive, again, and very deliberate in your words that you choose. So use those carefully. Now, then you're going to target your audience. So when I mean target the audience, you're not going to use a shotgun approach to just kind of gather everyone around, right? You're going to figure out who are you actually going after. And when we talk about LinkedIn, especially LinkedIn, you can target other physicians. You can target physician assistants. You can target medical schools. So that's what you want to do. You want to begin to really target and zero in on where you're going to find the correct people for your job. And then you're going to track your results. Your results tracking is important because it tells you where you've been successful, where maybe you haven't been. And so then you can plan, again, your next ad where you've been successful. For instance, when I did a lot of recruiting, we had one position that the best place that we could recruit was on Craigslist. And it was the weirdest thing, but Craigslist was it for this one particular position. So other things we'd use LinkedIn or Facebook or different modes of social media or advertising. So think about that and be sure to be tracking that. Now, next slide, please. Now, once you have your ad together, where are you actually going to put it, right? Besides social media, there's other places. So there's the National Health Service Corps. There's events and job fairs. There's state employment websites. And that can be beneficial for maybe not your physician jobs, things like that, but if you have support staff positions, that can be a beneficial website to use. Your journals and newspapers may be useful in rural areas, and I put that very clearly there. If you have a clinic in a rural area or somewhere where people like to vacation to, a lot of people, when they're in town, they'll pick up that newspaper, right? They'll pick up that local paper. But it won't work really necessarily if you're in an urban environment. Say if you're in Kansas City, no one probably picks up the paper looking for a job because there just isn't any jobs advertised there any longer in the newspapers. Retired military sites. I know many of you are near military bases. Be sure you're tapping into the retired military. That's a huge benefit for health centers. And then, of course, residencies. And the next slide, please. Dental schools, primary care associations, there's just all sorts of different places where you can place the ad. And this is why it's important to track where are your applicants actually coming from. Magazines that are interesting to candidates. I know of a CEO in Texas who actually would advertise in hunting and fishing magazines because that's what she determined her physicians, male or female, were actually reading. And so when they would read those at home, even if they lived in Tennessee, she was hoping to recruit them. And so she used ads in the back of those magazines and was very successful with that. The one last one here, which I think is actually the most important, and it sounds like many of you have it in place, which is in-house advertising. Make sure you know that all your staff knows that you have an opening. Offer them a bonus if they find someone, right? Because out of all the people that know more physicians is your physicians, right? If you look at me, I know more HR people than I know physicians. A physician's going to know more physicians. An accountant's going to know more accountants. So utilize that tool within your health center, and that's a huge important tool to be using. Next question, or next slide, please. Social media. Oh my goodness. This is the good, the bad, and the ugly about social media, right? Everybody loves it or they don't like it at all. And so, but think about this. Most of you have heard the term 7 degrees of separation, and there has something to do with Kevin Bacon too, I think, the 7 degrees of separation. But on social media, it's actually probably smaller than 7 degrees. When you start looking at who all you're connected to and who they're connected to and who the mutual friends are, it's probably less than 7 degrees. And that's why it's so important that you actively use social media, and of course in a very smart way. So think about that a lot. Next slide, please. All right, connecting with people. LinkedIn. Did you know that on LinkedIn there's 467 million members? That's an awful lot of people to target with your ad. And you can do that on LinkedIn. And I'm going to show you how one of the cohorts, I don't know if she's on here or not, but she actually just used LinkedIn yesterday to try to connect and at least have interest in her health center. And we'll show you that ad in a second here. But LinkedIn, so it's the largest professional network in the internet. If you're not on LinkedIn, you need to be. Or if your health center is not on, they need to be. You need to make sure that you're always active on LinkedIn. And it's hard to manage all these social media sites, but you can put up something that doesn't have to be totally, an ad written by an advertising agency. And we'll show you an example of that when I get to the next one here. And hopefully the person is on today. She's one of your cohorts. So the next one is Facebook. It showcases your health center, right? And think about Facebook especially as what you want people to understand and see about your health center. Because it's becoming the place that people go if they are looking not only for a job, but say they hear about your health center. You know what people do now? Not only Google it and look at your website, more importantly, they go to your Facebook page for your health center and they scroll through your posts and find out about what kind of places this really to work. Because they see how much advertising, and it might be that you're advertising, you're doing a community food drive. It might be pictures of your employee picnic. But those are all making impressions in people when they're scrolling that and finding out about your health center. So make sure you're using that. Now on LinkedIn for advertising, you can actually target physicians. You can target a certain medical school. You can target different things with your advertisements. It does cost a little bit of money on LinkedIn to do that, but you can certainly do that, and you can see how many people have opened your posts, etc. It's an incredible tool, so don't overlook LinkedIn. Additionally, Facebook, in addition to doing free job postings, right, you can also advertise and, again, target the demographics in which you're looking for. I know of a health center, I would not recommend this, but they actually targeted medical assistants that worked for another health center because they thought that's their perfect recruitment tool. And they targeted them on Facebook and showed their ad to them and actually stole quite a few of the medical assistants away from another health center. So I don't recommend that, but it can be done, and that's the power of the social media. Next slide, please. This is our very, very, very own Susan Crow, right? Susan, are you on? If you are, please hit the chat button real quick, because here she talks about what her responsibilities, this was her post yesterday on LinkedIn, okay? So she talks about what her roles are, right? And then she talks about how the staff are exceptional professionals, and we treat and support an amazing group of individuals with our health center, right, in the community. And they work with high standards, and people deserve the best. I mean, she just goes on and on and on about her health center. Now, is that an actual ad to come work for them? It's not probably a ad that she would put somewhere else, but it certainly gets me intrigued, going, what is this place? Can I see more? If I'm looking for a job, do you think I'm going to contact Susan? You bet I sure am. Next slide, please, because then after this beautiful post that she has here, she has a picture. And so it makes it very personal, right? It makes it very personal, like, oh, I could call and I could actually talk to Susan in a unicorn hat. But she has made it very personal, and that's how she did that. I'm sure that it was not that hard for her to actually put up. And Susan, if you're on the phone, let's talk about this real quick when we are done. All right, next slide. We have the other social media sites that you have is Twitter. And Twitter can be good just to get your information out, right? A lot of health centers are on Twitter, and they talk about the great things they're doing in the community. They talk about advocacy. They talk about maybe a job posting. So it is a matter of mixing it all up. You don't want to use any one of these strictly for advertising jobs, right? So it may be that you mix in, these are your positions that you have open, and the next day you post about, the importance of a flu shot. And the next day you might mention that you have some openings in your health center. The next day you might post something else. So you want to mix it up a little bit. You don't want to use it exclusively one way because people will get tired of that. But Twitter can be great. There's also some handles that you may want to watch. So at physicians, at surgeons, at psychiatrists, and that puts your tweet onto their sites also. They'll also see it. And be sure that with any Twitter, blogging, YouTube channel, podcast, whatever you're doing, LinkedIn, Facebook, that you're actually using hashtags. Hashtags can be very important when someone's searching for something. And especially when we look at the millennial population, this is what they do, right? They search by hashtag instead of just Googling it. So make sure you're doing that. Blogging and putting on your health center website is awesome. It keeps you forefront, right? You want to look fresh. You want to look new. If you have a YouTube channel, actually use it. It kind of comes to any of these areas. If you have them, you need to be actively using them, not just letting them sit stale. You don't want to look at a Facebook post that shows, in 2016, we did this. Make sure you're doing it consistently. Doesn't have to be every day. Just make sure it's consistent. And your YouTube channel, again, can be a private channel, but you may have a video of your health center, or it may be a public channel. And you may want to put that video also on your website. And you could do that just with your iPhone, right? Walk around and get a video of your health center and say, this is where we are. Walk down the main street in the community and say, this is what it looks like to live here. You can do that and put that on YouTube, put that on your website. And then on your website, make sure that you're up to date and that it has a fresh look. And make sure that it's easy to maneuver around, because that's probably the biggest thing. And people will always go to your website and your Facebook page. Next slide, please. So Next week, the assignment is to complete tables 17, 18, and an ad text. So even if you don't want to complete the ad text and put it up on the discussion board, be sure you're actually working on your text for your ads. And sometimes an ad doesn't take a lot to tweak. Just sit back, close your eyes, try to think about why do you work where you work, and why do you like living in the community you're in, and start writing those words down. And that'll increase your ad quite dramatically. It'll be much more descriptive for future ads. Then we have office hours next week, next Wednesday the 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern. You go to the same link that you went to today, and during that time, you have access to myself, Suzanne, Allison, and Mariah to ask us any questions or to just bounce different ideas off of. So during that time, it's fabulous. The next one, the next webinar, the next slide, please. The next webinar is actually November 15th, and that is, we're going to talk about the screening process, and Suzanne is going to do that one and the importance of doing that. And I was excited to see on the discussion board, many people said that they do initial interviewing through different video chats, whether it be GoToMeeting, Zoom, etc. And Suzanne's really going to dive deep into the importance of doing those initial screenings so that you're actually finding the right candidates to actually bring in and pay to have that interview with you. So what to expect over the next week is that ask any questions you have. You have all of our emails. Next slide, please. You can look at the webinar recording from today or any past webinars. They are in the discussion board. If you have any discussion board questions on the assignment, feel free to email us, call us, put it on the discussion board. And for that, you are done for the week. You are through week 7. Think about the Friends song, and I hope that puts you in a good mood for the rest of the afternoon. And we are here for you here at the Recruitment Bootcamp. So with that, I say thank you very much. And if you have any questions, again, connect, ask, connect with your peers. This is a cohort, and we want to make sure that you always feel like everybody here has your back. So with that, thank you. Have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon, and we will check back with you next Wednesday during the discussion hour. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann, and thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.